This is Delete Your Code. Hi, I'm Mike Miles. I've been a developer for over 15 years, mainly in web development. Currently, I'm the director of web development at MIT Sloan, the management school for MIT, where my team and I are responsible for the public-facing web properties of MIT Sloan, such as the website. If you want to know more about me, you can find me on my website at mike-miles.com, as well as all over the internet with the handle MikeMiles86. So on GitHub, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on the GitKon Discord, that's my handle. Okay, so delete your code. 3 words that are very important for developers of any experience and any skill level to understand and utilize. And I'm hoping by the end of this presentation, you're going to understand the benefit of knowing when and how to delete your code. But let's take a step back and talk about code bases, especially active code bases. Active code bases are ones that are continually changing, ones that you're working on, be it for days, for weeks, for months, or even years. And active code bases go through a cycle of changes. The first part of this is that you're gathering requirements, understanding what problems you're trying to solve, what value your code base is trying to deliver. You take those requirements and you build out functionality, updating functionality, changing functionality, adding, removing features. And then you're taking those changes you're making and hopefully you're refactoring them in some way, updating your code, optimizing it so that it best delivers the values and meets those requirements. And then you're going back through and analyzing the next set of requirements you have, any changes, requirements, and you're working through those as well, and you're going through the cycle. Now, as you're making these changes, what you're going to come to find out is that in most code bases, what they should contain is only the code that delivers that needed functionality. That the only thing that should be in your code base is what meets those needs and delivers that functionality and meets those requirements, and nothing more. Well, what else could a code base contain other than code that delivers functionality? It can contain obsolete code. Obsolete code are those unused variables, functions, and objects that exist in your code base but are no longer being used for whatever reason. Or there's functions, methods, and objects that have been deprecated and replaced by newer versions or updated models, but they still exist. Or then there's whole sets of files, old CSS, old JavaScript, third-party plugins and dependencies that are no longer needed or don't serve a purpose or meet the needs of the code base of the project. These are all examples of obsolete code. Now, having obsolete code in your project doesn't necessarily mean it's detrimental, but most obsolete code can cause problems in an active code base. What sort of problems can obsolete code cause? Obsolete code decreases the readability of your code base. It makes it harder for another developer or yourself in the future to understand what that piece of code is doing, because you have to go through and sort through additional code that doesn't need to be there. In this JavaScript example we have, there's a variable called cart total on line 3, 4, and 5 that is then being processed, but it's not actually being used. Instead, there's another variable on line 6 that is called total that is being used instead in the rest of the code. So this cart total variable here is not being used. It's obsolete, but it's decreasing the readability by still being in place. Obsolete code increases the complexity of your project by having obsolete code that you're working around. That means you're building new features, functionality to work around what's already there, thus adding complexity to something that doesn't have to be as complex. In this PHP example, there's a function called getMessage that prints out the word hello. And then there's another function added called updatedMessage that adds the word world to it. And it seems at the end of this code example that you really care about the updated message. But instead of getting rid of getMessage or refactoring it, that function is being pumped into the other function. And this is overly complex for what it needs to do. Again, this is just a simple example of what complexity obsolete code can add. But the worst is that obsolete code can introduce unknown vulnerabilities into your code base. It can produce options that allow people to execute and take advantage of your code base that you don't want them to do, producing unexpected results. In this PHP example, there's a function called getUserValue that has a code comment that says do not use, that because it's returning post value, which you should never do this in PHP. Now that old function is commented out, the call to it down at the bottom of this example, and the new clean submitted value function is being called instead. However, that old insecure function is still available. And if you leave obsolete code in place for someone to use, eventually it's going to get used and produce unexpected results and potentially vulnerabilities. So when I say delete your code, and this is important for developers to know, what I actually mean is delete your obsolete code. Any of the code that's in your code base that is not needed to deliver that, meet those requirements or deliver that functionality should be deleted. The problem is deleting code is difficult. Now, deleting code is not actually difficult. Anyone here can hit the delete key in your IDE and get rid of your code. You can highlight code and delete it and remove it. You can remove dependencies. That's not the difficult part. So what I actually mean by this is that deleting code with confidence is difficult. As developers, we take pride in the work we do. It takes a lot of creative effort to solve a problem, to write the code, to do so in a way that makes sense. And so getting rid of code and being confident that the code you're going to remove is a difficult thing to do. And just like anything that's difficult for humans, if we can avoid doing what's difficult, we're going to avoid it. So there's a lot of excuses out there that developers use to avoid deleting code. You may say, well, I don't know what will happen if I get rid of this, so let's leave it in place. Or it's been here for so long, this functionality has existed for so long since I've come onto this project, I'm gonna leave it in and just work around it. Or the almighty question of, well, what if we need to put it back? If we delete it and we have to put it back, how are we going to do that? It's going to be harder to recreate it. So maybe we should just comment it out instead. There's many, many, many excuses that developers can use to avoid actually deleting code from the code base. Now, one of the two methods that most developers employ when they're avoiding deleting code but not using it is one, leaving it in place. So here in this JavaScript example, there's a function called calculateTotal that you may notice has two return statements. It used to just have one called returning the total, but when this developer realized they have to add tags to it, they don't want to get rid of the old one, so they just add another return statement. This is overly complex, confusing, and it's avoiding removing that old return statement. Or more popularly is people just comment out whole blocks of code. So in this same similar JavaScript example, instead of leaving the old code in place, the old calculate total function has been commented out and a new one's been written, just in case the old one has to be restored. Obviously, this avoids deleting code and it's a quick, temporary way to do it, but it's not a long-term solution. It adds more problems than it solves. But if a developer has some solid techniques for how and when to delete obsolete code, you can feel more confident in doing so. The first thing is to use a code linter. All modern IDEs, all modern programming languages have plugins and linters that you can implement to check out what code can be safely removed. Most IDEs will highlight for you when a variable is obsolete and not being called so that you know you can get rid of it. Or they allow you to track how a method is being used and called so you can see the tree and how it's being used. So use a code linter to better understand your code and if it's being utilized or not. Add descriptive code comments. Follow the coding standards for your language and your framework and add comments to your functions, to your methods, your classes, to each line, almost every line of your code, but comments that clearly explain what the code is doing and how it's going to be expected to be used. This will help you when you need to reevaluate and refactor if code can be removed if it's duplicating something that another method is using. Commit early and commit often. Hopefully you're using a code repository such as Git, and if you are, as you're making changes, as you're deleting code, obsolete code, commit those changes, commit them often, write commit messages that make sense and explain what you've changed so that if you do need to revert it, you can go back and read through your commit history and revert a single commit instead of finding whole blocks of commented out code that you need to uncomment and make sure it still work. And then finally, test. Be that manual testing, smoke testing, or automated regression testing. Make sure you're putting in tests in place or you're performing tests as you're deleting code to make sure you're still getting the expected output. All these things will help you feel confident in deleting obsolete code. And when you do that, the results you're going to see in your code base that doesn't have that obsolete code when you've deleted obsolete code, one, your code is going to contain only what is needed to solve the problem and nothing more. You're going to have exactly what you need to meet your requirements and nothing that's just sitting there potentially waiting to cause a problem. Your code is then easier to read and maintain, especially if you're writing code comments and it only contains what it needs. It's going to be easier to make those changes because there's not a lot of extra things you have to sort through and a lot of complexities as overly complex things that you don't need to pay attention to. And then changes are easier to find and potentially revert if you're using things such as Git, because you can look through your Git history, see the changes instead of sorting through commented out code. You'll be able to find what was removed, and if you need to put it back, be able to put it back. So, delete your code. Delete your obsolete code. Feel confident that you can do this, and know that when you delete your code, it's going to benefit you, your team, and your code base overall. And it's going to be better in the long run. So if you like this presentation, I hope you go forward and look at your code and think today, like, oh, I can delete this one line, and you do so confidently. If you want to review these slides, they're available at this bit.ly link, bit.ly/GitKon22delete. And I look forward to talking more with you on this subject in the GitKon Discord. Thank you.